organize this seminar jointly with the Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Research, the Center for Competitiveness of the Visitor Economy at the University of Surrey, and the International Association for Tourism Economics. So thanks to all the partners for making this webinar possible. Before passing the floor to Professor Gang Li, I would also like to mention that our next IATE research seminar will take place on December 9, and that will be a special session devoted to PhD students in tourism economics, with the aim of contributing and supporting emerging scholars in the field. Moreover, I would like to mention that all the seminars of this series are being recorded and are available on our new YouTube channel of the organization, and that all the future events are announced on our new LinkedIn page. So with this, I am passing the floor to Professor Gang Ling. Thank you very much and enjoy the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Oriol. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar. As Mary and Oriol and Marian explained, this is a joint webinar co-organized among ICRE, JHTR, IATE, and COVE. So I would like to just thank Mary and ICRE for the facilitation of this webinar. And also would like to thank Oriol and IATE for sharing the platform with the participants. Let me first just say a few words about the COVE Research Center. So COVE stands for Competitiveness of the Visitor Economy in the University of Surrey, and I'm the director of COVE Research Center. So in this research center, we are dedicated to researching about the drivers and the challenges in relation to competitiveness across all different levels, including the firm level, sector level, and the destination levels. And our COVE Research Center has 4 research themes, including economic modeling and forecasting, entrepreneurship, innovation, risk, and uncertainty. The third one is the future of work. And the fourth theme is about decision making and destination marketing. And this theme is led by Marian. So I would like to say a few words about our special issue, advancing behavioral economics in tourism and hospitality research. Now, as we know, tourism is very complex, and tourist behavior also is very complex. And the tourist behavior is rarely based on a rational decision. Therefore, using the traditional economic theories, new classical economic theories may not be able to fully explain the complex tourism phenomena. And in the tourism and hospitality research field, we know the direction we are moving forward is to draw different disciplines, theories, and methodologies together. So behavioral economics is by nature an interdisciplinary field of research, drawing theories from the consumer psychology and the behaviors and solving the issues and trying to address all of the complex issues from the psychological, cognitive, emotional, cultural, and the social perspectives. And we feel behavioral economics can be a very important and useful theoretical foundation for us to further advance the discussion, the knowledge in tourism and hospitality research. Therefore, Maria and myself, we co-edited this special issue together with Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Research. Now, we received a number of initial abstract submissions, and in the end, after careful selection and the rigorous review process, we published 12 papers in this special issue plus an editorial paper. So we are very, very happy to see the fruitful outcome of this exploration. And if you are interested, please do read the whole special issue. And this is the second webinar of the series promoting this special issue. And today we are very happy to have 4 teams of authors to share their knowledge, their insights of the related papers. So I look forward to listening to the presentations. Now I hand it over back to Maureen to explain how we are going to conduct this webinar.
Thank you, Gang, and thank you for the introductions of all the different associations involved as well. It's nice to hear more about the other research and initiatives you're doing. So for this webinar, we've got 4 presentations. We've got 4 papers from our special issue. Each presentation is 12 minutes long, and we will move from one presentation to the next and then have a big discussion and Q&A session at the end to give us time to also do some overarching discussions of behavioral economics in general, but also linked to the different papers. So you can either ask your questions in the end, but you can also put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section, and then also will reply either directly or in the discussion session in the end. Our first presentation is from Gabrielle Lin, and Gabrielle has to unfortunately leave before the big discussion at the end. So if you've got questions for Gabrielle, please put them in the chat, or you can also email her directly. She's got her contact details. If you've got some questions, she's happy to engage in a discussion afterwards as well. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Gabrielle Lin. She's a lecturer and Director of Research and Impact at the Edge Hotel School, University of Essex. Her research interests lie in applied and behavioral economics with a particular focus on demand modeling and decision making. She investigates how economic principles shape consumer behavior and sectoral development using econometric and statistical techniques. And her recent work explores in particular the impacts of COVID-19 and the cost of living crisis on industry demand and employee wages. And one maybe additional information, Gabrielle Lin is also a former PhD from the University of Surrey, so it's nice to welcome you back in this format and see you again. And I'll hand over the floor to you. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you so much, Marian, for your warm welcome and your introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to share our paper titled The Heterogeneity of Hotel Demand Curves Across Consumers and Contexts. This is co-authored with Dr. Jason Chen from the University of Surrey and Professor Haiyan Song from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Speaking of the motivation first, most prevailing economic demand models assume consumers are homogeneous. They treat everyone as if they respond to price in the same way. And price elasticity is typically estimated only at an average price level. So this overlooks the dynamic nature of elasticity across the price range. But in reality, consumers vary a lot by their demographics, preferences, and risk tolerance. And contexts vary too, such as normal periods versus crisis situations like the pandemic. So there is a clear need to model complete heterogeneous demand curves that can review how consumer characteristics and environmental factors shape price elasticity across the full price range. So our aim was to build hotel demand curves at the disaggregate level. We wanted to go beyond estimating elasticity at a single price point and instead capture how elasticity evolves across the full price range. And by comparing these curves under normal and pandemic conditions, we can identify which hotels and consumer segments show resilience or vulnerability to crisis. And this study applies the behavioral branch of behavioral economics, which is quite different from the cognitive branch that most of us are familiar with when we mention about behavioral economics. So cognitive behavioral economics brings psychology into economics and focuses on how biases affect decision making. It explains why people deviate from rationality, for example, through heuristics or loss aversion, but it mainly gives us point estimates of those choices. In contrast, behavioral economics turns the logic around. It introduces economic principles into operant psychology in order to study the economics of behavior itself. The focus here is on environmental influences on behavior, and the framework models continuous functional relationships between price and demand. Here, Under this branch, consumption is viewed as a behavior reinforced by stimuli. And in our case, the stimuli are hotel products or services. And demand is considered the outcome of defending the essentiality of these products against necessary costs. And this foundation allows us to represent demand not as isolated decisions, but as complete curves that capture how the behavior of each individual consumer evolves under different pricing and environmental conditions. So the behavioral economic demand model includes four main parameters. We have Q0 to represent the demand intensity at zero price. So literally, it represents the highest possible demand. Alpha indicates the rate of elasticity, that is how quickly demand declines as price increases. Essential value reflects the consumer's valuation of the product. A higher essential value means a more inelastic demand curve, which declines slowly as price rises. So it is mathematically the inverse of alpha. And we have Pmax to mark the optimal price where total revenue reaches its peak at the unit elasticity. So the shape of the behavioral economic demand curve is log concave, with increasing elasticity as price rises. And this translates into an inverted U revenue curve, where revenue first rises with price, then falls once elasticity exceeds 1. And we applied that model in the hotel sector in China, focusing on domestic leisure travelers. We conducted an online hypothetical purchase task experiments with participants randomly assigned to one of 6 treatment groups, 3 hotel types, economy, mid-scale, and upscale, and 2 consumption situations, normal and pandemic. Each participant indicated their likelihood of booking a hotel room at 13 different price points, from 0 up to 5 times the market average room rate. Demand here was measured as purchase probability rather than quantity, because hotels are infrequent, high-value purchases for individuals. And we also captured demographics, accommodation preferences, and risk tolerance. The equation here models the relationship between price P and demand Q. And apart from Q0 and alpha mentioned before, K here is a span parameter that defines the range of logarithmic demand values. And this parameter is required here because 0 is undefined on the logarithmic scale. And to compare demand strength between consumers or contexts, we use the essential value, calculated as the inverse of these parameters. And again, a higher essential value means more inelastic, stronger demand curve. And finally, we applied F-tests to assess whether these demand curves differ significantly across consumers and contexts. The results show distinct patterns across hotel types. Basically, economy hotels acted like necessity goods. Their demand curve remained stable between normal and pandemic periods, showing consistent elasticity and low essential value all the time. While the demand curve for mid-scale hotels became more inelastic during the pandemic, suggesting consumers perceived them as safer and good value options in crisis times. However, the demand curve for upscale hotels became more elastic during the pandemic. This reflects the reduced willingness to pay for luxury in crisis times. And now let's look at how demand heterogeneity appears across consumer groups. So starting with gender, we found that males tended to show more inelastic demand, meaning they were less sensitive to price changes, while females were more price responsive overall. By age, mid-aged adults showed the highest valuation for hotel stays, while younger adults had the most elastic demand curves and were least responsive to contextual changes like the pandemic. And higher income consumers consistently exhibited higher essential values, suggesting higher perceived value and lower price sensitivity as expected. Risk tolerance emerged as a key differentiator, particularly during the crisis. We saw risk-tolerant consumers maintained demand even under uncertainty. And finally, preferences did matter. Loyal customers displayed stable inelastic demand curve, while B&B users shifted their preference toward mid-scale hotels during the pandemic. In terms of theoretical advances, this study models complete demand curves across a full price range, enabling a dynamic view of elasticity rather than a single coefficient. And this study parameterizes elasticity dynamics, linking behavioral valuation directly to price sensitivity through the concept of essential value. Also, it extends demand modeling to the disaggregate level, quantifying heterogeneity across consumers and contexts. Our findings also carry several practical implications for hotel managers, especially during the crisis times. For economy hotels, the key strategy is to maintain stable pricing rather than adjusting price heavily during crisis, because their demand is relatively stable and price sensitive. So competing through hygiene and safety reputation is likely to be more reliable and effective than lowering prices. For mid-scale hotels, demand becomes more inelastic during crisis, which gives them greater flexibility in pricing. They should adopt flexible pricing strategies and target middle income and crossover B&B users who seek reliability and value during uncertain times. For upscale hotels, the focus should be on protecting their loyal customer base and making cautious price adjustments during downturns, because luxury demand is more volatile in crisis periods. The broader takeaway is to identify and nurture essential customers, those with consistent inelastic demand curves and high essential values. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors and JHTR for this opportunity to publish and share our work. A big thank you also to Marianne Gang for coordinating the special issue and organizing this webinar. Thank you very much for all your attention. I look forward to your comments and discussion, although I won't be here for most of the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And I'm sure there will be questions coming up later that you can reach you via email. And there's one hand raised. Is there one? I think we've got time for one very quick question before Gabrielle leaves. I saw a raised hand. I don't know if that has. No, I think that has disappeared. Thank you very much. Very interesting approach, and I like how you help us understand the difference between the cognitive behavioral economics and the behavioral economics at the beginning. So it's very nice to have this clear structure of our focus in research as well. Thank you. I'll introduce our next speaker. It's Dr. David Boto Garcia. He's an assistant professor of economics at the University of Oviedo in Spain. His main lines of research are household and tourism economics. Other research interests include productive efficiency and behavioral economics. So I'll hand over to David for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion, for the presentation, and all of you for being here, and also for the invitation. This is a joint work with some colleagues, and I will focus on the main points, but obviously you can dig into the paper in the special issue. Well, this is the outline of the presentation, and the starting point of this work is that we all know that travelers are averse to risks, when there's a shock, either a natural disaster, a terrorist event, whatever, they become unwilling to travel to these, let's say, dangerous areas, because from a theoretical perspective, they want to avoid the risks or any situation that could compromise their security. and they experience some anxiety, some fear, and this varies by profile, by sociodemographic profile, as some previous research has shown. But most importantly, apart from the objective situations that can happen, people have subjective perceptions about this potential risk. And when there's an event, maybe the objective probability is not very high of experiencing another situation, but they perceive that this could happen again. So what we do here is to try to characterize how destination choice varies in cases that one destination becomes more riskier, and to this end we combine prospect theory, reference-dependent preferences, and also random utility theory. And in doing so, the goal is not only to see that these areas become less chosen, but also the reallocation effects, the potential substitution of destinations because people stop traveling to these areas and move to other areas. The application we do is we use domestic data for Spain, and we exploit the occurrence of terrorist events in Catalonia that were a shift to risk. People started perceiving this area as more risky. Maybe the perceptions about the probability of new events taking place increased, and this generated some substitution patterns. And indeed, we show evidence that people stop traveling to Catalonia, their choice probabilities declined, and the neighboring areas of Valencia and Andalusia were the winners, let's say. There was a reallocation effect, so in this case, Catalonia was harmed by the situation, by this event, but other areas absorb part of this demand. Well, we, let's say, we speak to the literature on destination choice in general, and also on research on these substitution effects, on these reallocation patterns following events. And as I was saying, the added value is that we provide some theory, some micro-founded characterization. And this is basically, in the paper we elaborate a little bit, but basically this is the model. We assume that when choosing a destination, people have an expected utility about traveling there. This utility depends on characteristics and also prices that enter negatively in the sense of Lancaster. And then there's let's say a gain-loss risky function that enters with a negative sign. So the more risky, the less utility, apart from some error term for idiosyncratic factors. And this risky component is composed of two parts. One part is, let's say, a baseline risk. Okay, there's a reference probability of experiencing a problem there times the levels of utility. This is a baseline objective, let's say, risk. And then there's maybe some news, some media coverage, some social media information that comes and maybe changes perceptions. So there's a change in subjective probabilities of experiencing risk at the destination. And this is weighted by let's say, a sensitiveness parameter that governs how sensitive people are to improvements or declines in these probabilities of experiencing problems. Okay, so we elaborate a little bit more, as I say, in the text, but this is more or less the intuition. Okay, in a classical framework, this risk component is absent, and we introduce it as part of the utility, but with this prospect theory perspective. Okay, so and we argue that when there's an event, when there's a terrorist event, the media typically sends this image of the area being dangerous, being problematic, and people, maybe the objective probabilities are not very high, but they have the feeling that they could experience some pain if they go there. So these perceptions depend on an objective part and some subjective changes that are also asymmetric. Okay, people are more sensitive to losses than to potential gains. And as I was saying, the application is based on domestic data for Spanish trips, okay, people that travel within the country, around 7,000 trips at the monthly frequency. And we have 1 year before and 1 year after, August 2017, which was the period where these terrorist attacks took place. So what we estimate basically is, let's say, a multinomial logit, and we assume that the utility depends on some observable characteristics, some area fixed effects, and there's here a binary variable that measures the potential change in utility of traveling to Catalonia in the aftermath of the event. And we also allow for some personal characteristics explaining preference heterogeneity like age, income, gender, and others. And these characteristics include the traditional ones, okay? Distance to the origin, temperatures, hotel prices, okay? This part of the exercise is more standard, but we examined how these propensities, these probabilities of traveling to this area change in the aftermath of the attacks. We have a change in probabilities. This is like probabilistic demand, okay? And this is given by this formula. And then for us, the interesting part is, okay, what happens with the rest, okay? If there's a decline in the probability of traveling to Catalonia, there's because all of them sum to 1, there's an increase in propensities to travel to other places. And this cross, let's say, elasticity somehow can be seen as an elasticity of substitution, and this is given by this formula, okay? We have an elasticity of substitution for each region. And well, we estimate the model, we get standard coefficients, we see this area, Catalonia, experience a decline, okay? These are just coefficients, they cannot be interpreted, but the issue is here, okay? When we estimate these partial effects in percentage points, we see Catalonia experience a decline of around 0.6 percentage points in the probability of being chosen, and this comes with increases reallocation towards other parts of Spain, and particularly towards Andalusia and Valencian community, which are, let's say, quite similar, quite close, geographically speaking, and they were, let's say, the main winners of this shock. So basically, what we try to show is that when people see that an area has suffered a shock, even though some months later after the jihadist attacks, the area, maybe the objective probability of suffering another attack is very, very, very low, people appear to, let's say, be afraid of going back there and prefer to switch to other similar areas with similar characteristics, located in the Mediterranean Sea and all that, but maybe perceived as less risky. So we see there's like some winners, we can call like that, from this sort of events. Obviously, we have a lot of limitations. I want to acknowledge them. We focus on domestic flows only, so a valuable extension is to move to international trips. Obviously, the choice sets, how people decide. There could be some nested structures. Maybe they decide first between coast or inland destinations, between north or the south, and then maybe the decision process is follows a sequential. Is sequential. And okay, obviously we would like to have more a continuous rather than binary index of risk perceptions. And obviously, if we could have longitudinal data and we could observe the same traveler over time and how he or she changes his choices, it would be ideal. But you know, we need to work with the data we have. But in any case, there are some things that we could improve, and if we continue in this line of with this line of research, is something to explore in more detail. So this is basically the main idea, and I want to be on time. So thank you very much for your attention, and any comment and suggestion is more than welcome.
Thank you very much, David, for this great presentation. And yeah, it's interesting to see how these risk perceptions affect on a maybe geographic scale, how they affect neighboring countries or in your case, neighboring regions. And like you said, in your limitations, it will be interesting to widen or see how it changes if you've got different source markets as well. So maybe that's something to extend on in the discussion as well. Thank you. I'll move over to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Ibrahim Mohammed. He's a research assistant professor at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University's School of Hotel and Tourism Management, and his research interests include revenue management and behavioral and applied economics. So thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Marion. And then on behalf of my co-author, Bashak, I would also like to express our gratitude for this opportunity to publish this paper and also to present at this webinar. So our paper is entitled Application of Heuristics to Revenue Management Systems Override Decision Making. And I believe that many of us can recall booking a flight, a hotel stay, or maybe a ride, let's say Uber, and then noticing that within minutes or hours, prices have changed so much. And sometimes we think that something must be wrong with this system that change the price. Well, what we see is actually revenue management at play, where prices are dynamically adjusted to balance demand with available capacity or supply. Now, in many of these revenue management systems, the prices are actually determined by algorithms. And these algorithms basically are rule-based and are subjected to some pitfalls. They are unable to recognize special events, one. They are also unable to recognize human intuition. They don't have compassion. And when that happens, obviously the prices may be unreasonable. Now, well-known examples of revenue management systems that have gone wrong includes 2016 bombing in New York, where Uber's pricing algorithms increased prices by 500%. And similarly, in a terror attack in London Bridge, prices were increased by 200%. Now, based on these revenue management systems, these prices obviously can be said to be right, but when looked at from human perspective, which is required for pricing, they certainly would be said to be wrong. Now, so given the inherent limitations or pitfalls of revenue management systems, studies have shown that nearly 40% of revenue management systems recommendations are overridden. And in many cases, the rate of override is so frequent that it can even get to as high as 28 times in a day. So we were motivated by these high levels of overrides to investigate basically which revenue management systems or how revenue managers actually interact with their systems when they go wrong. So our study was guided by the question of how do we know, or what are the heuristics that revenue managers use when their systems go wrong in order to bring them back to track. So we investigated the common heuristics that are commonly used or frequently used, and also determine how they affect performance generally. So the study is guided by bounded rationality and heuristics decision-making. And these frameworks have been generally applied to understand decision-making under some conditions: uncertainty and risk, limited information, pressure, and then difficulty in arriving at decisions. Now, these conditions apply well in revenue management situations where hotel revenue managers are under pressure because of the perishability of room nights, sometimes to take action, and these actions may be quick fixes to a long-term problem. So the context actually is a hotel revenue management situation where prices have to be adjusted. So we use exploratory sequential mixed methods design, starting with a qualitative research, followed by a quantitative. In the qualitative phase of this research, we interviewed 20 revenue management experts drawn from various countries with experience in using different revenue management systems at property levels, at corporate levels, and the data for the qualitative was analyzed using Brown's and Clark's thematic analysis processes. For the quantitative, we conducted online surveys, and then these surveys were actually developed based on literature and also the qualitative phase of the research. And eventually 172 respondents from 30 different countries were deemed fit for the quantitative analysis. We use partial least squares structural equation modeling for the fact that, limited or insufficient understanding on the application of heuristics in revenue management context, and also the sample size. So for the qualitative phase, several heuristics were identified, including anchoring, overconfidence, outcome confirmation, bandwagon, loss aversion, and default. Now, our goal in this study was to look at the most frequently used. So we focused on the first two, which topped the list. And for these two heuristics, the insights we obtained from the qualitative phase indicates that anchoring is used mainly because of the fact that revenue managers need to comply with some policies of their companies. However, when it comes to overconfidence, the use of this heuristics was rooted in the fact that revenue management systems seem to be black boxes, and therefore there was limited understanding sometimes. So revenue managers would rely on their own beliefs to adjust these prices. Now, for the structural equation results, basically anchoring had positive effects on performance, while overconfidence had an inverse relationship with performance. However, what was very prominent was the fact that if systems are adjusted using inputs instead of outputs, then the system learns, and therefore the negative effects of overconfidence or anchoring could be actually corrected, because over time the system tends to improve based on the intervention of the revenue managers. So largely the results align with theoretical arguments that decision-making tends to be based on certain factors, including recent information, outcomes of decisions, and all of that. It also supports empirical studies on managerial confidence and its negative effect on profitability, as shown in the literature. The results further shows that heuristics can actually have distortionary effects through the system. In other words, when systems are interrupted, they tend not to learn from the historical data. And this certainly is something that must be avoided. Otherwise, outcomes in the future could also be influenced. So for the implications, first, we say that our study has highlighted heuristics that revenue management professionals need to pay attention to, given their consequences. And also, it highlights that the lack of transparency and limited understanding of the system's decision-making processes results in some overrides. And therefore, system developers have to be aware of this and take steps to make sure that the system is made more transparent. So in terms of contribution, this study has conceptualized the relationship between heuristics and performance in the human revenue management system interaction context, and has actually examined the effects of this through the revenue management system's ability to learn from the revenue managers' interference in the system. So to conclude, we say that applying heuristics to overriding revenue management systems recommendation can improve or hurt hotel performance. Therefore, it is imperative that they are applied judiciously. And here, what we mean is that system overrides can be done at the input level or at the output level. What we found is that when you do it at the output level, there is no learning. But if you do it at the input level, then the system itself is able to take into account the new information you have introduced and therefore improve its forecasting ability for the future. This study, as I mentioned, used some cross-sectional survey, and for that matter, is subject to some limitations. And hopefully the direction for future research is that experimental design could be used. And also, if there are longitudinal data for that purpose, I mean, this would enhance the external validity of this research. So thank you very much for that. I tried to stay within the time, and I'm sure I did that. Mario, is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mon. Yeah, perfect timekeeping so far. So we've got a lot of time for discussion, which is nice. Yeah, thank you for this great presentation. And I can see the direct applicability of your research for the industry. So that's really nice to see this focus on applying and showing the variety of behavioral economics from like theory focus to the industry application. So thank you so much. I'm moving on to our last speaker, who's coming from also your university. So she's Miss Lin Lin Ni is a PhD candidate at the School of Hotel and Tourism Management at Hong Kong Polytech University. And her research interests include tourist behavior and tourism economics. And I'll hand the floor over to Lin Lin if you want to share your slides for your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Lin Lin. Here, on behalf of my co-author, Professor Haiyan Song in our university, I'm going to present our recent paper entitled Tourism Spending in Response to Stimulus Checks, Insights from Mental Accounting. In recent years, we've seen governments worldwide deploy cash-based stimulus policies, or we can call it as stimulus checks. So the purpose is to combat economic downturns. The goal is very straightforward. They hope to put more money in people's pockets to boost consumption. Well, since tourism is income elastic, so such policies matter a lot to the industry. But a crucial question arises: does this unique type of income actually translate into more tourism spending? Well, the answer, as some research reveals, is more complex than it appears. Well, essentially, stimulus checks are a type of windfall gain. And the behavior research tells us that the unanticipated, unearned, effortless money tend to increase spending propensity, especially on historic purchases, because the positive emotion from receiving it can alleviate self-control anxiety and guilty for indulgent consumption. So this challenges the classic economic idea that money is fungible, meaning all the money is the same regardless of where it comes from. Also, we see this kind of violation of fungibility in tourism studies. For instance, whether it's like non-salary income versus other income streams, personal savings versus children's support and labor insurance, lottery winnings versus regular income, we can see that the source indeed influence how people spend on tourism. However, despite this evidence, the windfall effect of stimulus checks on tourism is barely examined. So this is the first key research gap our study addresses. Moreover, the windfalls can shape distinct spending allocation patterns. We see this in studies of real physical programs. For example, past policies have seen different outcomes for tourism, from the U.S. tax cards and Australia experiment and the recent Hong Kong voucher scheme. So this research are very insightful. However, they primarily document the outcome rather than explain the underlying process. So this brings us to the second research gap. The fundamental mechanism behind how stimulus funds are allocated to tourism is still not fully understood. So to address these gaps, we need a behavior perspective. So we turn to mental accounting principle, which recognize the non-fungibility of money and accounts for trade-offs across different spending categories. In general, the process of mental accounting works in 3 steps. First, people categorize money by factors like source and amount of money. Second, they budget by setting limits for each category. And finally, adjust the allocations as they spend. So based on this framework, we developed 6 hypotheses contextualized within different economic backgrounds, including pandemic-induced recession versus a normal recession. So in the categorization stage, it is assumed that stimulus funds are more likely to be used on tourism when the source is framed as a bonus and when the size is larger. Then in the budgeting stage, individuals decide how much to allocate to tourism by weighing its perceived benefits. Specifically in this study, its contribution to quality of life. And against the potential costs, namely perceived health risk during a pandemic-induced recession. And finally, in the adjustment stage, people reassess and reallocate their budgets. First, the importance of tourism in one's life can protect its budget from being used for other needs. Second, expense ambiguity, such as a trip that also serves as an educational purpose, can make it easier for people to justify more tourism spending, by blending tourism with other purpose or goals. So to test these 6 hypotheses, we conducted a series of studies in Shenzhen, a major Chinese city. In first step, a pilot survey helped us identify those 5 key spending categories that people may consider when given a hypothetical stimulus fund. And then in experiment 1, we combined stages of categorization and budgeting, since they are conceptually different but behaviorally difficult to separate. So we combine these 2 stages and measure them within this one experiment. So in this experiment, almost 800 participants were asked to allocate their hypothetical stimulus check across these 5 categories, which was found or which was identified in our pilot study. And we use a between subjects design, manipulating 3 factors: the source, the size, and the context. Finally, the experiment 2 used scenario-based tests to test people how adjust their mental accounts when the situation change. So we presented the participants with 2 situations. One where tourism account has a surplus and people encounter with unexpected expenses from other categories, and another where it doesn't have any money left in the tourism account, but the participants were given options that combine tourism and the other categories, and they were asked to decide whether they will use the money or the funds in other accounts to for tourism or tourism-related products. So in this way, we test the tourism importance and expense ambiguity in experiment 2. So to analyze the data, we employ statistical models tailored to each study. I will explain one by one. For experiment 1, where the outcome was the proportion of funds allocated to each category. So it's a little bit different than the normal dependent variable. So here, standard linear regression was unsuitable. Instead, we use the direct regression to model the allocation pattern across all the 5 categories, and then the better regression to focus specifically on the share of tourism. And for experiment 2, where the outcome was a binary choice to spend or not. So here we use a binary logistic regression. Since each participant made repetitive trade-offs between tourism and the other 4 categories, we apply the GEE for these repeated measures. And these are the 2 examples of the trade-off tests. I know they because I cannot show the photo or the real survey here. So it may be a little difficult to understand, but I would like to explain more in the Q&A session. So now let's look at the results. First, stimulus checks from a bonus source and with a larger size leads to a higher spending share of tourism. Actually, you can see more also higher spending share of the other categories. And the effect is consistent in the better regression results. So supporting hypothesis 1 and 2. And second, we found a positive effect of quality of life. The more people value tourism for their well-being, the more likely they spend. supporting hypothesis 3. And this effect was even stronger during the pandemic because of the significance and the positive value of this interaction value here. So it highlights the tourism's role as a way of recovery and comfort during difficult times. Surprisingly, the impact of health risk perception was insignificant, so hypothesis 4 was not supported. This may be because stimulus programs were timed during stable phases when the environment is relatively safe, or because the industry have adopted some safety measures like contactless services as we experienced in the past few years. Well, this table shows the results of our study too. Here we observe that both the importance and the ambiguity proved to be significant, supporting hypothesis 5 and 6. Essentially, the more important tourism is per person, the more they protect its budget from being used to other needs. Conversely, when an expense is ambiguous, like a study tour that blends tourism and education, people become more willing to spend on it, as they can justify using funds from other mental accounts to tourism. So, in conclusion, we think our study makes contributions from these three aspects. Theoretically, we rethink the relationship between income and tourism spending through the lens of behavioral economics, because the traditional economic models for tourism demand always treat other kinds of income as the same. So here we make a difference from the regular income, and we recognize the difference of income sources. And practically, we bridge behavior and policy, and we also propose some suggestions for the marketing and for the policy design to inform more effective measures that may support tourism recovery in the future. Methodologically, we introduce policy design variations and modeling dynamic spending adjustments over time, which has not been seen in the current study. Of course, our work has limitations. Future research should extend on this by incorporating cross-cultural comparisons or integrating more microeconomic factors, and most importantly, validating these findings with real data from the real-world physical programs. So this is a quick look of our study. Thank you for listening. We look forward for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lin. That was very interesting, and it's nice to see the first ideas of linking the macro level with the micro level, which is something that we try to encourage as well with this special issue. Thank you to all the presenters. It was really great to hear more about your research from your own by your own words rather than just reading it. And also, I just want to mention again that we are recording this session, and I'll put the link to the YouTube channel from ICRE in the chat as well, where you can find the recording from this webinar and also the first webinar. And with this, I am going to hand over to Gang to lead the Q&A and discussion session. Thank you to all the presenters again.
Thank you, Maria. I would like also to add my thanks to all of the presenters. We lost Gabrielle because, as she mentioned, that she has to join other meetings. So I'm very, very pleased to listen to four quite different presentations from different perspectives, looking at the applications and applicability of behavioral economic theories into tourism and hospitality context. We started with Gabrielle's presentation, and she took quite a different perspective of behavior economics. And it was really useful to see her comparison between the behavioral branch of behavior economics and the cognitive branch of behavior economics. So I think her perspective of behavior economics research is different from the other three. I think the other three mostly follows the cognitive branch of behavior economics. But also, I see across all of the four presentations, risk is a common theme across the four presentations for research studies in different contexts. And also, a number of key behavior economic concepts and theories are applied across all of the works, including prospect theory, the anchoring, framing, and also in Linian's presentation about mental accounting. All of these are very, very important key concepts in behavior economics. So the theme of this special issue is about advancing behavior economics research in tourism and hospitality, and from both theoretical and methodological perspectives. So my first question to all of the presenters and also the everybody here in the panel, and also for the audience, for the participants, if you would like to share your comments, I think we can't hear you, but please feel free to add your comments and questions in the Q&A box. So here, the first question I have for all of the presenters is, to what extent was your research still rooted in the new classical economic paradigm? And to what extent has your research departed from this new classical new classical economics? As we mentioned, the behavior economics is related to the new classical economics and also with a lot of differences. The fundamental difference is the rational decision making and the bounded rationality. So I would like to listen to our presenters' thoughts on this point. Who would like to start sharing your thoughts?
Well, may I?
Please, David.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I was thinking maybe in 2025 we are feed with a lot of information, with a lot of content, and we are more prone to, let's say, behavioral reactions. I mean, if you receive a lot of stimulus and if you have a lot of experiences, then this allows for all this framing, this aversion. All these patterns are, let's say, feeded in this new context of information. And in my setting, if you consume television, if you consume the media, and you are given a lot of information, sometimes true information, other times not very fake news, let's say, this generates a lot of reactions and this leads to behavior that maybe is not the classical paradigm of a utility maximizer with all the classical setup. So I think the society, the new ways of people connecting with each other generate or increase these behavioral patterns.
Very good. A very
Okay,
important point.
if
Yeah.
I may also add my perspective, please. So
Yes, yeah.
basically, I mean, because our study was centered on revenue management systems, I think the fundamental models of these algorithms is based on rationality, you know, based on the classical assumptions. However, I mean, like I cited some examples to show that these systems can go wrong. And whenever they go wrong, it requires that rationality at that point doesn't hold. you probably would have to think about the consumer and how he sees decisions that are or prices that are set based on these rationality assumptions. And it has the tendency to create some misperceptions and, if you like, reputational damages. So I think that it is important that we recognize that price setting, of course, is aimed at maximizing revenue and profit. However, if you are thinking about the long-term maximization of revenue and profit, then some irrational input behaviors make sense depending on the context. Yes, please.
Good. Thank you, Ibrahim, for sharing this. Yeah, it seems that from the business perspective, from a revenue management perspective, I think a revenue maximization is still the goal. This is the same foundational assumption for the neoclassical perspective of revenue management. So for this one, it's definitely still relevant to the neoclassical economic route, but it goes beyond that, taking account of the risk factors and a number of additional external environmental factors. Lini, any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah. Actually, even though, as I just told, our research tried to use a novel perspective to rethink the relationship between income and tourism spending with the consideration of non-fungibility of money. However, I think the basic or the fundamental idea is still follows the classic or the traditional economic theory, since all these kinds of physical stimulus policies they are based on the ideas that income will increase consumption, and this increased consumption can help the economic recover. So all the ideas in my studies also follow this framework. So we discussed the increased spending in hope of tourism recovery. So I think maybe we will provide more ideas or think about more factors in this in a way of help the tourism recover, not only think about the very simple links between income and tourism consumption.
Great. Thank you, Lini, for your explanation. Yes, your research also is directly rooted in a neoclassical economic framework, but again, also with the mental accounting perspective, you take account of the bounded rationality into the consumer or tourist decision-making process. So before I continue with my own questions, I noticed that in the Q&A section, there have already been quite a few questions already. And I noticed that David is busy dealing with the first couple of questions, so I'm not going to bother him to distract him. So let me turn to some questions for other presenters. So here I have a question for Lin from ACTA. As you said, tourism is becoming elastic. What exactly does it mean? Can you please elaborate? Lin,
Thank you for your
please.
question. Yeah, okay. So this is a very economic term. It's a macroeconomic term. It means that tourism demand is very sensitive to income changes. So when the income increase or decrease, the tourism consumption can change a lot. So that means that's why we monitor closely to this kind of policies, because with the injection of more disposable income, there is a hope that people may spend more on tourism.
Good. Thank you, Lini, for your elaboration. And I have another question from Professor Andrea Simon, also for Lin. I'm not quite familiar with your regression methods. Therefore, this question is to improve my understanding. Since it is ratios, should the sum of over the regression add to 1 For example, for your bonus variable, similar to what we find in the typical almost ideal demand system model, it doesn't, and it doesn't, and I wonder what that then means. If it doesn't, then I wonder what that means, or how does one then interpret the coefficient?
Okay, thank you for your question. Actually, this direct in regression is a little bit new to tourism research. Here, in this direct regression, there is two things that we need to take into account. Firstly, all the proportion of each category has to be positive. They have to be within the interval between 0 to 1. And the most important is the second thing is about their sum has to be 1. So I think your understanding is correct here. And the difference is that it has the dependable variables is not only one proportion. It's like a vector of all the proportions of each categories. So that means, the regression, we have to think about the interaction of different category. So that's why when I put the directly regression at first, because the respondents has to allocate it among these categories. So tourism is not only determined by the single proportion, but they have to interact with other categories. So here it makes it more realistic in the experiment. So and let me see the can I share the screen?
Yes, please, Lin. Yes, go ahead.